Do not be afraid. Do join us. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to take your smartphones out because we would like to start with checking your attitude and moods here in the hall. We are going to use Menti, and of course the question is going to be connected with the title of the debate, Smartphones at School. Which way is the right way? So 14% are in favor of banning smartphones completely between 14 and 16. 86% would like to get it regulated to some extent. So we all agree that screen time can be harmful to children and youth. So we are thinking about how to safeguard young people against this. This is not just about toxic school. This is also about looking at how young people could really function in this new reality. That is also about new technology. So this is what we are going to discuss today. So there are different approaches. So this is about not intervening at all, regulating screen use or using it only during the lessons or only during the breaks. So there are many different ideas. However, we are still lacking one direction and support. So for example, France, Norway and Australia have decided to ban smartphones. And at the same time, there is a question, if not at school, where the young people can learn how to consciously and well use new technologies. Whether can we reduce such a situation only to less favorable academic use, or maybe there is something else, something that Joanna please mentioned. Take into consideration why this young person uses the smartphone so intensively. So which way to go? Which way is the right way? This question is very important, and we are looking at different options. So with us, we have got Sarah Abramson from the Norwegian Research Institute, who has been researching many different approaches. Also, Olympia Lipska, who works at a school where certain limitations have been introduced regarding smartphone use. And Zuzanna Gawlik and Janek Kozłowski, both high school students. They are also representatives of young people here, but they also participate at the consultation panel at NASC. Zuzanna and Janek are actually the target group of the regulation. So before this meeting, met up with a group of their peers, and so they are going to show their own perspective, but also that of their peers. Professor Jacek Krzyżalski is also here. He needs no introduction, but he is a researcher, visionary, author of many publications, research, studies, etc. But in the context of this debate, he is also a member of the Committee for Combating Behavioral Addictions. We also have Rafał Górski, the president of the Institute of Civil Issues, Save Children from the Phones Initiative, E-Addiction and Electroscope. He is member of many different initiatives. In the first part of the meeting, I'm going to ask questions that I have prepared for our panelists, but I'm pretty positive that they will also answer questions that you will have. So I would like to give you an opportunity to ask questions as well, because rarely do we have an opportunity to ask questions to such experts. Zuzanna, Janek, I would like to start with you, because this whole discussion is about your everyday life, the time you spend at school, and how regulated it can be, to what extent you would have the right to use mobile phones. So I would like to ask you, what do you need mobile phones for at school? Janek, would you like to answer first? Well, I was going to ask you, but let me start. So I would like to concentrate on high school, comprehensive school, because we attend a high school. The situation is slightly different in a primary school, because here in a secondary school we have completely different needs regarding telephones. From my perspective, the phone, for me, the basic one is to check my schedule, my lesson plan. But also in here we have got a lot of materials that we can use in our everyday education, and you can do it at school. Yes. Especially after the pandemic, the attitude has changed, that many materials, they can be at school. For example, my school, we have the whole domain in Google. We have got Gmail account, we have got our own cloud, and this is where you can ask questions to the teachers, you can contact your teachers. We also have access to PDF files that is sent by the students, and this is super useful when during the lesson, for example, the teachers ask us to look there, because we can look at charts, for example, that would be difficult to draw them on the chart using chalk or a pen or a marker. However, it is also true that this is a distraction, and so they contact friends who send them information, and those messages could wait. You can get them after the lessons, or they use it for the so-called relaxation. And we know that this is not good for our relaxation, so they look at Facebook and Instagram, but in fact it kills our time and our possibilities at school. I can see how it influences myself and my concentration as well. So first of all, this is also your contact with the outer world, but also with your friends. This is also about receiving information about what's happening out there in the world. What we use the phone for is up to me. This is what I use it for. So we talk about entertainment and we talk about the school. So I would like to start with the first one. So I would like to know, in as far is it true that you're using this just for entertainment and not to, because some of them will regulate their emotions, that for example they don't have any friends, so during the break they just scroll to manage it somehow, or they get overstimulated by too much noise during the break, so they put their headphones on, and this allows them to self-regulate. Does this appear in your conversations? Is this what you hear from your peers as well? First of all, because I have a perspective of working with younger kids, 6 to 13 years of age, they don't need such a separation between living online and living at school. And this was stated by children that we met with online recently, because they get into the vicious circle of the so-called social skills. Okay, I don't know how to speak with my peers, then I will do it online, and then because they all abuse, they overuse the social media, they are not able to do it in real life. So this continues and goes on and goes on. So I believe that the devices in general, not just the phone, are pretty useful, because the educational system would like us to take notes, to read, to listen to, and to repeat. So I have noticed that not everybody works and learns that way. So we can record film, or we can also use the AI to change the text for easier to read or for dyslexic people. So the tools that we receive from the internet are very useful. So I believe that the school shouldn't ban, it should educate. So this should be about autonomy, about allowing the people to use what they have, because they have the whole world and the possibilities in their pocket, and the school is not able to really use all of the tools that we have. And do you notice any negative impact of using your mobile at home? Yes, cognitive issues, listening, connecting the dots, connecting the facts. That is difficult when we have a phone that is vibrating, is being lit all the time and getting messages all the time. And we have got 30 phones in the classroom, so even if they are in a silent mode, it gives us this FOMO. Well, my friends have a good time and they're having a good time and I have to be stuck at home. So I do believe that it does distract us. So I am in favor of electronic tools, maybe more laptops than the phones, because we'll also have socialization during the break. And we talked about it as it is an issue. I cannot see a good solution because banning is not education. And also, we cannot show that the device in itself is a problem, because the fact that we have the device is not a problem. The problem is how much we use it and how we use it. Just like I mentioned, a primary school and then the secondary school, whether it's a comprehensive school or vocational school, there are huge differences and we should take it into consideration. So there was a report published last year. It was by the Youth Council at the Ministry of Education, and it was about whether there should be a limit on phone usage, smartphone usage at the primary school. 50% said yes, and then 66% responded no at the level of the secondary school. There were about 1,500 students, and this was the voice of the students, and these were the comprehensive high schools. And in the primary school, there were responses also from guardians, from parents, and also from teachers. So this is really interesting. Because there should be also a differentiation, because if we demonize the smartphones, that this is like a Pandora's box, if you open it something bad will happen, then after each training regarding digital hygiene, that this is, all evil, you should throw the smartphones out and not use them at all. But instead of banning it at every level, we should look at limiting them or step by step teach how to use them. That is the primary school. And in high school, we should really get this atmosphere of using those smartphones and not just fulfilling your needs that are very often dictated by being addicted. So the smartphone itself is not evil. It is about how we use it. However, the student and the child, if you do not get a good example from home and you only learn at school, it's not going to change anything. Because at school you spend about 6 to 8 hours. The majority of time you really spend at home, and you don't have the cooperation between the school, the family, and home. We'll have a child who only is, whose smartphone is banned at school, and then the child is addicted anyways, then there's only going to be anger, and that anger is going to go against the educational system, which is flawed in itself.
One more thing that is important for me personally, you mentioned that it's students who took part in this research. So it's so important to emphasize participation of students in the debate on the phones. I think that unless we're engaged ourselves and able to express our opinion, no one will obey the ban. If you're taking away something from us, give us something in return. Can you replace demonizing of the smartphone with new ways of using it, actually? I guess you can see how all the topics that have been here from the very beginning of this morning are reflected in this debate. I also hear that young people tell me, oh no, we'll be hearing again that we're addicted to phones. It shows us that we're doing something that is not right. We need to learn ourselves too. Olympia, I'm curious of your experience. You're a practitioner, you work in elementary school. Children of whom the high school students have just said that should be banned from using smartphones at schools. So do smartphones make it more difficult for you to lead the class, or do children get less focused? Well, I'm grateful to Zuzia for expressing that I agree that smartphones are needed for education, but let's keep the difference between the elementary and the high school. For younger kids, children and young teenagers, they do not know how to use those opportunities. We know our children where we're a small school. What we aimed for is make them not use the smartphones. They're not using them now, but we do things instead of that. We try to educate them, telling them what smartphones impact. Look, it's a thing that makes you sit and use your thumb to scroll. And the way you do that is a little bit without you being present in it. We also gave our kids other opportunities. Active recess breaks, where children can go to the sports venue or a sports room and be active. Some of them, they can go outside. There are places where children can sit and have a conversation in their groups. We have silent places. We have a tent. So if anyone feels like isolate themselves, there's a blanket, there are pillows, and children use them. They can also come to teachers and have a conversation. There are ways to avoid being attracted to a smartphone. We noticed that they have spent a lot of time in their smartphone, with the smartphones in their hands, sitting next to one another and just texting instead of talking. On the other hand, well, we have 3 long breaks in our school due to the logistics of lunch. After 3 long breaks, there was a problem with getting children to focus. So I asked my teacher teams to share with me their reflections, like their first impressions of what the time is when the children don't use the smartphones anymore. So some teachers said that they enter the classroom faster. The classwork may start sooner. It doesn't take 10 minutes. So they're more organized, more present. They take out the books and the pencils from the backpacks. They are also more present during the classwork. Before we introduced a total ban on phones. We collected the phones in the boxes that were on the teacher's table, and I was also told that the presence of the smartphones distracted children. We have the groups of children that are not 30 people, classes or groups, but just 20, for instance, or less, and they also were distracted. It's still elementary school, it's still younger children. So which way to go? I think the way to go is in the middle. We adapted what we did to our conditions and the needs of our children. But also, we cannot forbid smartphones to everybody. We have 200 kids. But some huge schools have hundreds. And what do we do? Will we appoint a teacher to surveil and be like a police person? So we introduced a ban. If I remember correctly, 70% of parents were in favor of a total ban on smartphones. Now they have in the daycare that is after the lessons, they have time to have a conversation, to talk. They're not forced to, do that. But it's rather a situation when girls come to my room and say, "Oh, do you know what has just happened? I got in touch with this girl or that person again." The school is in a rural area, so they don't go out to the so-called downtown. Sometimes it's 15 kilometers between the houses or the homes of the kids. Even though they're friends, they don't see themselves so often. So what we did is for us, but to transfer that ban on high school students, I don't think so. When they become students, they will absolutely use internet, and well, those are the needs. What I'm hearing is, most of all, that you had a process, and quite consciously you took into account the specificity of your micro community at school. You had parents that were made aware of that issue. The children were included in the process. And what's also very important is that it's a tailor-made solution. School created space for children to build friendships. So it's really adapted to the needs of your community. Also, in those 3 voices that we heard, I heard, on the one hand, limitation, ban, and the way you can see it has a positive impact, but we cannot forbid it. So I'm curious, what direction will this discussion go, and what other people will say? Will that option be strengthened, or rather will it be the opposite way? Thank you also for your practical insights. Now I have a question to Sarah.
You've done research. Ja zaraz je przetłumaczę, także proszę się nie martwić. Natomiast Sara będzie odpowiadała po angielsku, więc ci z Państwa, którzy...
I'm going to translate the question afterwards.
Smartphones and school ban. Even though you talked a little bit about it today, I would like you to summarize your findings, research findings, and just tell us about the Norway recommendations for the smartphone school ban. I poprosiłam panią Sarę, żeby pomimo...
So although Sarah has already told us about her research, I asked her to summarize the findings of the research and tell us about the Norwegian recommendations of banning smartphones from schools.
Collected data from our this is about the Norwegian middle schools, And I asked them when they ban, like in which year, when they ban middle school. And this data is then connected to the Norwegian registry data, where we have access to information on like every student's test score, their grade point average. I know whether they visit their general practitioner or whether they go to a psychologist and so on, and for what kind of reasons. And what I see is that after schools ban phones, I see that girls' GPA improves, and they go fewer times for mental health consultancy, especially to specialists. I also see that girls are more likely to apply for an academic high school track versus a vocational track. And that's a quite important step, because in Norway, if you apply for an academic track, you are also eligible for university after you finish high school. And I also see that bullying decreases both for boys and girls at these schools. And I see this is particularly for girls that come from low socioeconomic or have come from a family of low socioeconomic status. I also see that schools that have a very strict ban on their phones, which means that they ban it throughout the day, they do it better, especially when it comes to test scores among their students. So I'm not a person that like generally is against technology. I mean, I'm an economist and I love programming. But I think there is a huge difference between like structured and unstructured technology in school. And I was very open-minded when I started this research, because it could also potentially just be that smartphone is a learning tool that students can really like use this, they can Google information, and I mean, then that could be positive. But the thing is that I see no positive impacts, or I see only positive impacts, and if there would have been like students would have used the phone as a learning tool, then I would have seen the opposite in my result. I mean, then I would have seen a decline in test score, and that is not what I observe. I mean, the only thing that happens is that this is beneficial. And of course, I understand also that, I mean, this is about students that are in middle school. They are between 13 and 16 years of age. It's potential that this effect differs by age group of students. So, I mean, we need more research on like high school students, but there is also other research coming both from Spain and England that show the exact same results as I do. So this doesn't seem to be like very country-specific to Norway. It's actually as I said, other research from Spain that shows that, I mean, when schools ban phones, it has positive impacts on students' educational performance and also bullying. And there is research from England showing very similar results as I do, particularly when it comes to students of low socioeconomic status. And I think that's important, because banning phones from school is a very low-cost policy. It's very expensive to hire new teachers. And what I show in my research is that banning phones has the same impact of like reducing a class size by 2 students, and that's a lot. That's like very large effects for a policy that is almost free.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. Bardzo ważne ustalenia badawcze.
These are very important findings, showing a high positive impact of ban on smartphones. Let me come now to Rafał Górski. You wanted that from the 1st of September this year, a ban is introduced on the use of smartphones or electronic devices in schools. The ban would not cover the students that have special educational needs. This solution was not introduced, and we hear voices of experts that say it's too far-reaching. So my question is, why did you find this solution as the best?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
These are really particular gratitude, way of thinking is, it's not obvious that we're invited to a debate like that. A debate that is organized under the patronage of Ministry of Digitalization and also with corporations. Usually the voices that are expressed in a way that I will tell you are usually not present, but I'm grateful to the organizers that invited the expert from Norway. What you were saying about the results of your research is like really, a Polish saying is honey to my heart. So that's another voice for me to have a discussion with our experts who claim the opposite. I have two riddles for you. What do cigarettes, alcohol, and cocaine have in common? One is addiction, and that's what the person from the audience said. And the other thing is you cannot bring them into school. Second riddle. What does Google, Facebook, Samsung, and T-Mobile have in common? Those companies make money on our children to get high on digital drugs. The more they get high on it, the bigger the profit, the bigger the money. So what was our motivation? The motivation was simply, in the public debate, that was not discussed. We can see it being discussed now, but there was time that it was not discussed. But smartphones are not with us for 1 year. They have been with us for a long time already. I remember in 2018, we addressed the Ministry of Education to introduce a program or class on technological education. The reply at that time, I'm smiling, was, oh, but there is a class on how to use computer and other electronic devices. And I'm smiling because it's not the kind of technological education that we mean. It's not what is needed to solve the problem that we have. Professor Pożalski, in his presentation before this debate, he said we need positive activities. I agree. Of course, we need technological education in the understanding that Neil Postman understood it. Author of Technopole, The Triumph of Technology Over Culture, or To Have Fun Until You Die. A couple of decades ago, he said, Neil Postman said, technology is not only a friend, it's an enemy. And we need to be aware of that. Both teachers and students, to teach this history of technology, how technology influenced us in a positive way and negative as well. An example of asbestos that has been considered a friendly material for decades. If you have a family in the countryside, you know, there's houses with asbestos. After 100 years, it turned out how dark the side of this technology is. Stanisław Lem always said, every technology has its dark side that is unforeseeable at the beginning. And as you mentioned, we addressed Minister Barbara Nowacka and Minister Gawkowski, the Minister of Digitalization and the Deputy Prime Minister. And we wanted digital hygiene. And the second request and appeal was to the Minister of Health. And I think this one is more important from the point of view of our discussion. We need to have a digital fund. You know, companies that make people dependent on alcohol, they pay money to the Polish budget, and after that, the money is used for education, prevention, and so on. Why do producers of equipment such as tablets like Samsung, telecom producers like Mobile, Orange, why do large big tech, Google that has YouTube, and Meta that has Facebook, why shouldn't they contribute to the digital fund from which we will be funding big positive educational campaigns, as Professor Pożalski wants, and we will be educating on digital hygiene, participation. So we don't want a ban top-bottom, but bottom-down. I've been dealing and working on participation starting from 1998. I know how important participation is, but there's no funding for that. So why do those who make our children dependent would not pay for that? They are really not in this discussion. Most often in the panels like that, what it is said is parents are guilty, teachers are guilty, schools are guilty. So educational system is to be blamed, ministry is to be blamed. Who's not to be blamed? The dealers, the digital dealers. Addiction 2.0 publication published by Jagiellonian University, and there's a rule that the basic rule of a dealer is never get high on your supply. Steve Jobs never allowed his children to use tablets. Manfred Spitzler. I'm just coming to an end, but out of curiosity, whom of you has a book by Manfred Spitzler? Not many of you. Digital dementia, the era of cyborgs, a rich source of research quoted there. Let's use the sources by Manfred Dieslers. It was striking in one of the expert opinions. There was a lady online. We need to show to the children more of the analog world. I used to be, addicted to smartphone, and now I have this button-based smartphone. I was not able to participate in your activities here. I agree that if we are to set an example, then we should not get high on the smartphone. So, analog world. So, what do the following have in common? A map that helped me get to this hotel today. It's just a map. I think children don't know what that is. Paper notebook. I took some notes here today in this conference, and a pencil. What do they have in common? I think pencils is what they offer in Sweden or Norway now. This is it from me. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo. Mam taką potrzebę tylko powiedzenia, że
I have a need to mention, to add that the debate do not aim at finding the guilty party or anyone guilty, but to find creative solutions. Dear Professor, what do you think? Because you always say that you are against a total ban on smartphones at school. That's one thing. And the second thing is I would like you to also tell you what you think about the research that we like to quote when we consider banning smartphones altogether. First of all, thank you for this conversation, and somebody says, well, this is about the corporations, no one is interested. And initially I didn't want to participate in this debate with you, and I will tell you why. When I read the letter, the document that you sent to the ministry, I thought that the arguments that you use and what you write, because you talk about introducing the ban because you've seen a documentary showing really addicted children. Manus Peter, who is a pretty controversial researcher, so he only looks at a part of the results. He's got a very one-sided vision. Yeah, if you like riddles, then I will give you a riddle. When you have different research, what do they have in common? For 4 years with many psychiatrists, I worked with an online research when they looked at the internet usage. What do all of the good population-wide studies regarding problematic use of technologies, what do they all have in common? Yes, they are cross-sectional, but they have something in common regarding the results. And what is it? When we look at the problematic use of the internet with young people, what is the percentage of addiction that we can connect it with the internet? It's about 2%, yes? And over 10, that is the percentage of those who have a problematic use. So the problem is there, and you diagnose it well, and especially that it went in the wrong direction after the pandemic. So despite the fact that for the time being we don't have those restrictive approaches, well, I wouldn't ban the smartphone. I wouldn't say that taking away the smartphone and taking away the drugs, I wouldn't compare the two situations. I wouldn't say that it's the same situation. I wouldn't. So the next question, so why so few people show this addiction, even though the research is done by psychiatrists who specialized in this issue? For example, Oni Finberg ran such research, yes? So whether this problem exists, does it exist? Yes. For example, for online, we know that the problem exists, and you cannot say that you are not dealing with something important, because you do. However, the medicine can be different than the illness. What Ms. Fleece said, it's not about blaming. When we see children and we do a clinical assessment, these are children who have a complicated issues at home. They have issues with substances, with also peer relationships. So we all of a sudden we say, okay, we'll cut the situation. I will get some money from the corporations and the problem will disappear. I know it's deeper. I know I'm making it shallower at the moment because I believe in your goodwill and that we are talking sense here. However, I get a feeling that you only look at part of it. You talk about participation and at the same time you are saying about the ban top down at school. And I really liked our discussion. We had a really good discussion about the schools who introduced the ban. They are wise people, they discussed it, they introduced it as well. But I'm against an idea that someone is coming and saying, well, I'm going to make you happy, I will write to the ministry and I will be happy to prepare regulations that will impose all of this. It's not going to happen. Mrs. Abrahamson talks about her research. We can talk about the methodology, but we can talk about it and discuss it during the break. But what results do we have? First of all, research analysis and outcome really depends where we run the researchers. So, for example, there is a ban on taking your rubbish into the forest in Poland, yes? and we still have plenty of rubbish in the forest. Yes, and so in Poland, well, there's a ban on smoking at school. You cannot go out. You have to also have it imposed that you have to wear a symbol of your school, etc., etc. That was all imposed. It's connected with the culture as well. And I believe I have read everything that has been written, but looking at the research, and you can look at it, right? So that, well, we are not going to tell each other off, but we need to widen our perspective, our horizon. So, for example, looking at the issues at school in Moravia, for example, yeah? So there are also the issues. There is a ban, and whether it is respected, right? Is it respected or not? So what does it look like at your school? Is it really respected? Yes. So my school, really, it is orderly here. And other students say, well, we use it anyways. It's banned, but we use it anyways. No one respects that. So the question is whether the kids talk to each other during the breaks, whether they are reading a book, whether they are tired after the break. And against our vision, romantic vision, whether it changes everything, that a little bit more, there were kids who were slightly more physically active where there was the ban. Yeah, it was just the only difference, 27 to 45%. So logically speaking, they should differ. However, think about the times pre-internet. For example, when I was at school, and some of you as well, the breaks were not breaks when everybody talked to each other. They were active, they were dancing. This one, you know, was sitting down. This one was reading a book. This one was doing her maths homework. Yeah, maybe we should do different things during the break, but maybe somebody else wants to sit down. Yes. So I didn't really want this conversation, this debate, that because it seemed to me that your medicine is worse than the illness. So just think about it. People who are practitioners, and 85% are saying we want to regulate it, but we don't want the ban. And all of a sudden you come and we are to come to the minister. Dear minister, we are ready to introduce this ban. And I think that you are not taking into consideration many factors, many variables. You should open up to really look at the research. And we want to, you know, safeguard people against the blue whale challenge. And you talk about it on TV as well, but this, well, the typical cyberbullying, cyber violence actually doesn't look this way. It's invisible. Well, what is positive is the very fact that you are taking the initiative. However, allow the people to choose. So I wouldn't introduce a ban en blanc, just across the board. You can do it on a participatory basis, in line with what the people want. Then I say, okay, it's a good idea. However, I believe that it should be autonomous. So, for example, we made people happy that there's a ban on homework. Yeah, I will stop here. But I believe you're taking shortcuts. That I regret that we didn't talk about it earlier. But well, and I wasn't really I wasn't censor you. You would say what you would want, but you just closed the conversation. You didn't want to take it up. So I regret I didn't participate in that. But for me, this was like, you're taking shortcuts. You're dealing with an important issue, but you're trying to reach the moon, but just, you know, via Mars. It's interesting for me as well that for children up to the age of 10, 13, should they get smartphones in their hands? But the question is, what does it mean to give them smartphones in their hands? We talk about children, but let's talk about students, also university students, and we have exactly the same problem. They come to the classes and they try to be in the classes and somewhere else as well. So, for example, I have a problem with the students that they are not in the here and now, and I solve it just like at school. So if we have an idea how we are going to use the tools, so we use them in the situation when something good is happening, then even children from very problematic places, well, we can do something. So 2008, we did research of internet use of children with mild and medium disabilities, mental disabilities. And so there was like an interview. It wasn't a questionnaire, but it was an open interview. Do you use the internet? Yes. They were like 10 years old. So we asked the boy, did you learn anything from the internet? He answers many things. For example, Thomas's wheel. So we were so surprised. So this 10-year-old, okay, he wasn't a teenager, but a 10-year-old, and he said, I will show you. And he said, you know, breakdance. And he said, I'm learning breakdance watching YouTube. And I believe he was doing amazing things. And the girl said that I'm taking different motivational thoughts from the internet. So I ran research when we could see that someone uses the internet, but really things that are sensible. So the quality is more important than the time of usage. So for example, if the child is using that in a creative way, it's not only that it's my feeling, but also we see that it doesn't have to be this harmful, because you were talking about the teenagers, and we are running research for 11 to 17-year-olds and looking at children who on average use a lot at a risky way, and those who use it pro-social. This is like the Gauss curve, yeah? We have got a few percentage of geniuses who do a lot of things. We have got a dozen who do it positive. We have got like just over a dozen those who are negative, and then those who just use it, yes? Because you say that we have different views, but I refer more to data, and I have a feeling that it's not just so easy that you just don't do it. Because what? All of a sudden, then they don't have it, and then they get it? Well, you are right that when we say that when we start with a restrictive approach, well, up to 7 years, I wouldn't allow children to use it without a supervision from an adult, because even the youngest children also watch and they find different things that they shouldn't be using. But in order to use it in a creative way, well, it would be good to see the result of this result. We definitely do not have enough time for it. I'm sorry to be interrupting you. However, Professor, well, this is a heated debate, and that's really good because we can see the arguments from 2 sides, from 3 sides, and up to us will be to integrate all of this. So for all of us to find our own path or perspective. So we've been talking about the bans from every side, positively, negatively, from each side and with different aspects. So Zuza, Janek, if the schools were to introduce any limitations regarding smartphones, then how should it be done? What do you need from the adults in order to be seen and feel heard and also be participants in this. It's incredible, because if we ban it or we don't ban it, what is the alternative? If we ban it, what do we give? What is going to be the profit that it really will be a benefit, a profit for us?
If we take away a tool that harms some people, how can others not be harmed by this ban? So now, internet is indispensable for me to learn. If you take away the smartphone, what have I got in return? So in this debate between the ban, applications, debating, where are we? Where is our voice? Where is our opinion? How can you ask us of what we think? So what do you think? If it's the place now to express your voice, what do you need? What kind of participation? Well, let me make a comment on what Zuza said. So how is it possible to not work hard but smart? Well, that's a sort of translation of a Polish saying. I cannot imagine to have in Poland top-down ban in Polish high schools, at least high schools. It's unimaginable. We are already in high schools, 15 years old, 18 years old. There cannot be a situation, we won't allow it, when under some general problem, dozens of thousands of students will be in a situation when they have limited access to information through tools that they use for various purposes. I can't imagine that. Limiting smartphones, okay. But if you hear the voice of young people, for instance, in my high school, I know there are some attempts to limit the smartphones in my school. But what teachers decide, I cannot imagine that it's only teachers or the parents' council would be only bodies that will be listened to. We're 15 years old, 18 years old. Do you want to protect us? We need to be able to use smartphones. You should limit this when people are 15 years old. And of course, we avoid a habit or an addiction, but there's a problem of inability to use a smartphone. So if you want to gather that and solve it in a systemic way, do it with us. In my opinion, it's the youngest children that are to be affected, but there are also families. So I disagree with Professor here. Internet under the control of the adults at home is a good solution, because it's so hard to imagine a parent that will be this whole time controlling and assisting a child that uses the internet in a creative way. And how would a child use it? Well, it is doable. It is possible to supervise it, to really indicate when they can. Supervision, yes, but will that not make a child already used to using the smartphone? This is the starting point. If a child gets a smartphone on a tablet, they get used to using it. In what way? In an elementary school, students usually want to find the simplest ways and the simplest solutions. So are the solutions that are top-down the best ones? I don't know. I don't think so. Writing to a ministry, well, they don't know our reality at the ministry. It's funny for me when a public official says what they know, what we think, they know what we need. No, they don't. But if we go to a high school and sit down together and introduce the problem to students and present what impact it has on academic results, the high school students are not stupid. We're able to think. So we don't come to school and just get pulled into smartphones. We show up. We want to study. We want to learn, not for the sake of learning, but we want to learn something that will be useful in our lives, and using ChatGPT or Canva or just dozens and millions of other apps that will be useful at the university. It's also learning for us. So if you introduce a ban, the result will be absolutely the opposite. It's like banning to take out the garbage, throw the garbage in forests. That will be the same. We will be opposed to whatever regulations are passed about us without us. Nobody enjoys the situation when we are omitted in the crucial part of their life. We dedicate more than half of our time to learning. I work on a daily basis with families and young children who overuse internet. There's a reflection that rules without a relation become a forceful situation. When we translate that into school and introduce regulations in schools but without consulting students, then whatever ban we pass, it will generate resistance and really a lot of creativity to overcome the ban. In our school, there's habit of having gatherings, usually for the youngest kids. So they're collected, and there are all the kids that have had special awards, or they won something and they receive a round of applause. But if somebody does something wrong, it is also mentioned in a gathering. Our director, headmaster, had said that children used to also have obligation to put away the smartphones into a box. The children prefer having their smartphone on them. They feel better. They're probably switched off and in the backpack. We didn't want to store the smartphones in their lockers because that might become problematic. But the headmaster said a simple thing. I have not made my mind for this year so far whether the smartphones will have to be in the box at the secretary's office, or will they be in the backpacks? I'll consult people, representatives of the students, the parents. So she will talk to the students' representation, students' council, about whether they accept having their smartphones in their backpacks switched off. It's not a strict ban, and like saying, another Polish saying, children and fish don't have a voice. That used to be a saying in Polish. Children always have a voice. We don't always agree with it. And there may be other, practical solutions, but we need to listen. Yeah, so there's a space actually for those voices to be actually expressed and heard. What it teaches us is a sense of empowerment and influence that we have. Also, our relations with students are different. Well, we don't actually do that to totally ban something you just students obey. So we have other relations with them. Another important question is, what have we got for us instead of smartphones? For the regulations' sake, let's think, what is our proposal? I would like to ask a question to Sarah.
Znowu to samo, czyli zadam je po angielsku, potem przetłumaczę.
I'll ask it in English.
you talked about the school ban and your research findings, but from all this discussion, I can see that it is a process and it requires a certain knowledge of the needs of children, and it requires for the adults, for the grown-ups, to know how to answer those needs. And I was wondering whether you were only researching the effect of the school ban, or whether you researched before why the students are using so much of the smartphones, what they are doing, and what do they need for the ban to be effective. For example, whether they had any emotional needs or anything like that that you needed to address. Sara opowiadała o efektach zakazu telefonów komórkowych, natomiast z tej naszej dyskusji wynika też, że taka zmiana wymaga przygotowania i chciałam się zapytać, czy badano również nie tylko sam efekt zakazu, ale też czy badano wcześniej, jakie są potrzeby młodych osób w związku z tym zakazem?
Yeah, so first of all, I see that the ban is, I mean, there is not a lot of predictors at which schools that are implementing a ban, so it's not any like particular school that implement a ban, but it's most schools implement it. It's about like the timing when they implement it, and I see that most schools have like more of a lenient policy against smartphones, which means that like you don't have to hand in your phone when you arrive in the morning. You have to have it on silent mode, and it should not like distract the lecture. So that's the most common approach. And I mean, similar, I guess, to here in Poland. I mean, Norwegian schools, they are autonomous in like deciding if they want to have a ban or not. So when I did my survey that I connected to the registry data, I mean, teachers could also fill in like comments about the ban, and most teachers, they were very happy when the ban were put in place, because they could like, because what they generally said is that like, I mean, it's not just about that, like it can be very distracting that like just one student uses the ban and they constantly have to like tell them to put the phone away. But like when the ban was put in place, it goes easier, like, okay, it has to be kept away, you can't have it on the desk, you have to have it in the bag. Or the other approach was more schools that had like this strict policy where you have to hand in the phone to like a mobile phone hotel, and then you get it back like in the end of the day. And I mean, of course, schools can't keep the phone like after school hours. But I mean, I would also like to say, because what I understood is that, I mean, in Norwegian school, they are like very technology advanced. I mean, students still have like laptops or tablets or other kind of technology. It's like, it's about like which type of technology we should allow in school, and like if it's structured or unstructured. And I think basically every middle school in Norway now has like these one-to-one programs where, I mean, they use computers instead of the phone.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Inspirujące też uczyć się o...
This is inspiring to learn from the experiences of other countries which are more advanced in introduction of some of the limitations. I would like to leave 10 minutes for the questions from the audience. For 3 minutes, Rafał, can we get back to you? Could you reply to what we heard about your application or recommendation to the Ministry of Health? So 3 minutes for you, please, and then 3 minutes for Professor. So firstly, I still agree with Manfred Spitzwer that until 10 or 13 years old, it's better that parents don't give screen devices to the children. Young people about that age, well, I need to tell you that I was happy to hear that children will revolt and disagree. We are Institute of Civic Affairs, and we are happy to hear that people or children will revolt against something. students that are older than 13, 14 years old, there should be a civil panel. So a decision should be made in a panel when we select some students representative of the group. Well, depending on the life situation, like researcher from Norway said that a situation really gets worse if the families are poorer. So to decide what direction we take, we need a diverse representative group. And we need a panel in every school. That's great. I think there should be a more proactive approach of the Ministry of Education. It's the state that should take responsibility. In April, I went to a conference, Watch Out Smartphone. There were over 1,000 of teachers. Teachers came up to our stand and said, okay, but do you have any arguments, reasons, like legal reasons? Because we would like to introduce in the rules of our school. And the parents tell us, we will sue you. And we, as headmasters, we back off. So we need the lawmakers to be more proactive, both in a participatory process. But why not having a 40 million country that has no funding to have a proper widespread campaign and allow participatory process in all the schools? This is ridiculous. That affects absolutely serious matter of our children, to what degree they will shape our country later on. That's even beyond a discussion. They should absolutely do that. And my last remark, I agree that rules without relations, they just become a forceful, like forcing someone. And that's an approach that we should take. Professor. So it's much easier to ban something than to learn how to use it wisely. So 3 minutes, how to use the smartphones well. I'm happy because I have a feeling that this conversation gets us somewhere. Well, first you wanted a ban, and then I can hear you saying you want a conversation. You said to the minister, well, yes, but because we had asked for a debate and nobody paid attention back then. Yes, just so you want to put pressure on the citizens to get them revolted. I am joking a little bit, but it's okay. Now that we're speaking, I feel it's closer to the way I think. So, how to use it? Firstly, we made a large research about the generative AI, and I'm convinced. I will show you an example. Young children, no equality, different conditions, and so on. This is a great remark that it's them who lose most. They don't have digital competences. In many countries, people who use smartphones don't use it well. So the programs that only fund the purchase of the devices don't actually bring any good. Every rule should have their own application. Well, schools choose what they want. We have regulations, and for instance, I have a debate with my students, and while doing that, they're on social media. So what's the point of it? But then I am convinced that a participatory way of doing things is good. A panel, okay. Discussing a group. I'm not referring to a formal, rules, but I rather speak in terms of what we lose or what we benefit regarding on how we act. I would never introduce a ban. Well, I remember that there were bans introduced, and a teacher would say, well, don't say that I use smartphones, but I sometimes tell my students, okay, let's check this or check that. When we tell students that they cannot use it, but you do, they bring some essays that are not genuine, or teacher tells the students that the ChatGPT prompt should be write me an essay, but let's make it a middle level or make 5 mistakes. Then the teacher will not detect it. Also, there's a tool of making the opportunities equal for the students, but only when we teach them how to use it.
Then we lose the perspective, because we can say we don't deal with this at school, but then I could talk about another argument. And this costs us a relationship. And I, for example, work at the middle high school. So, for example, I cannot do it like this. What are you hiding? I cannot imagine a situation. Yeah, just open your bag. You know, what are you hiding? Well, I can understand it when it comes to weapons, to cocaine. But when we start introducing that for such a thing, so, well, at the moment we are going, well, then we are going to have the police at school 15 times per day, and they are going to check the bags, right? So I know that we've got the rules, we can expect that, but what can we expect? We should expect better relationships to each student, that the students are going to come to us with their problems. Am I going to come with the guy who is checking my bag, who is checking whether I'm not spending too much time on the toilet and is banging on the door? Well, I solve it with my students, because it happens a lot, because we talk about younger students up to the age of 13 and that they end up in hospital, right? But I have 90% initially, I have 90% of students who deal with that. If I see anyone using their smartphones, I will take it as an exception, that it's really important. We agreed that we don't use smartphones unless it's exceptional. You know, maybe after the second class, twice in a semester, I see someone with a smartphone during my class, because I don't need that. I need it when I work with younger kids, but I have a feeling that we are becoming policemen where we should be friends. During the pandemic, we ran research in 34 schools, and we could see that the digital hygiene is actually swept away at the same level among students, teachers, and parents. I'm going to stop you here, Professor, because this shows that we would need way more time for this conversation. And as usual, relationships are key, and in order for young people to use new technologies smartly, we are needed as adults. Anyone with a microphone? Are there any questions? Good afternoon, Dr. Godosia, Code Foundation. I had the pleasure of participating with you in the Stop Smartphone debate. The same thing, ban on smartphones or limitation on smartphones, but we concentrate on primary schools. And 90% of kids receive smartphones in grade 3 for the first communion. That's about 9-10 years of age. And so they are kids. That's about 8 or 9 years, yes? And many kids do not use smartphones up until then. And so many kids can use web pages not really suitable for their age. Well, at home, they have parents who talk about it, etc., and they use those smartphones together. But at school, if there is no limitation, in our dialogue, we talk about the primary school, where all the kids go out of the classroom for the break and they have access to smartphones during the break. What is your approach to that, Professor? This is very interesting from the research point of view. So, for example, harmful content, that's probably violence, porn, etc. So this shows what problems we are dealing with at the moment. With open Twitter, ever since the ownership changed, you can look and you will see, not even looking for such materials, there was no age block or whatever. And this was violence, these were live executions. So very often we don't have age limitation when it comes to access to porn. And we are helpless with that. So I'm against that as well. So is it about that they do not watch it or they do not watch it at school? And that's an important question, because the problem is that even the children who do not watch that, they still have access to it. So we researched 25,000 young people across Europe, and so where people watch it half an hour, that's really healthy, that's 30%. And we confirm with those who use over 5 hours per day, they see equally much violent content. So I would think that if we are satisfied, and it will be enough for us that we don't do it at school, so there are developmental dangers regardless what happens. So I want us to, and I'm in favor of using the tools that we have now, but the only way that we have at the moment that we can fight the work of algorithms is that we add new content that they are not going to find in their bubbles. Because this is when you change the internet, when they watch different valuable pro-social things. And if we don't do that, the algorithms will show what their friends show, what they had been looking for, what they have liked as well. So I am close to the issue that you are diagnosing. However, for me, this is like a band-aid on a broken arm. If it happens at school, so it's safe that they don't watch it and they watch it outside of the school, so they watch the pato streams and whatnot. It's a difficult issue, and for me, this is not satisfactory. We should be more ambitious regarding those issues. For me, it is not satisfactory that they don't watch it at school. They need to not watch it at home either. Any other questions? Quite a few. Tombatkiewicz, Olszewska, Aneta, Silesia Association for Family Mediators. We really take care of the family and young people. We cooperate with the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Justice because also this shows how we use violence, and people learn and watch it as well. But what is the medicine? We are able to bring children up until the age of 12, and that is the primary school. This is where we can influence as well. And afterwards, the influence is negligent. It gets dissolved. So I believe that up to the age of 10, the children shouldn't use those smartphones. Not even have it, yeah? That to the age of 10, to the 4th grade. From the 4th grade, we can have tablets, we can have multimedia boards as well. And then when we check something between the 4th and the 8th grade, we can use it as well. High school is different. We support young people in Silesia, and I do believe that we need to trust you, support you, but trust you as well. We don't have nationwide debates, but with the high school, we need to trust you because you're great. As I speak with the young people, well, the standards of safeguarding minors. Well, the agency is taken away from you. We need to give you tools. We need to show you how to safeguard yourselves and not close you in a bubble, shut you up in a bubble, well, that you are not supposed to talk with someone or someone is not supposed to talk with you. This is dramatic. And this is amazing. So we need to give them this possibility. So if we do not learn from the young people, we get older. We need to exchange information. I have 7 children between 12 and 33 years of age, and so I do have this perspective, really wide perspective. And I do believe that this digitization, this is the world view. This is really eye-opening. We can have so much development, gigabyte, really interesting, so that, you know, this is like prevention of alcohol abuse, and also being able to use the map in a natural way, but in, you know, in real life. If we have no access to the internet, everything is really important. But on the traditional map, we don't have access to the bus timetable, to also access to so as very aware people, I would like to thank Dr. Pyzalski, but this is very positive and this is a positive tool. So we need to be aware of positives and negatives. We have a lot of research on the brain, and not everyone is prone to addiction, and we have to be aware of that as well. Ladies and gentlemen, the last question. I can see that the gentleman, Aleksander Drzewiecki, parentteam.pl. We deal with education of parents regarding the digital world. Thank you very much. And it is great that we do not talk about banning access to the internet, to use technologies for education, but we just talk about the ban on using a private smartphone that is online all the time and can be used during the lessons and during the breaks as well for private use, including porn. So dear professor, dear doctor, you mentioned that it looks the same here at the university, just like at school. Well, it's not the same in the primary school or secondary school as at the university. So it seems to me that during this debate, we have sociological and neurobiological research, how the human brain functions, how it develops. And so we know that the prefrontal cortex is not developed in young children, and they cannot see the consequences of what they do. And however we name it, the child will need support because by themselves they're not able to do it. You also mentioned before that we see from Mrs. Fleece, a psychologist's presentation, that in many families there are dysfunctions. Well, no. Research shows that children have access to porn on average at the age of 11. And it's not just children from destructive or dysfunctional families, but this is by chance. It's because they come across such web pages or because other kids show it. My own daughter was 9 when someone else showed it to her. So on someone else's smartphone. So it's not the parents who show porn, it's other kids at school. So regarding the kids from primary school, it has a lot of sense, and it makes sense because porn is being widespread, because in those private devices, it's being disseminated, yeah? I can have parental control on mine, but someone else is going to show it to my daughter, as it happened. So I would like to end with a question to you, because it seems to me that we speak a lot about how we can learn using a smartphone, but I would like to ask about certain key competences that I believe a primary school can develop. For example, developing sensitivity, empathy, communication, or cooperation. I would like to ask you which of those competences, the smartphones, the private ones, can support the development of that, and how it can harm the development of these competences. What do you think?
Well, I have never said it's the same, but even up to the level of young adults, there is a problem of this parallel use of, but there are different mechanisms. First, you supervise and gradually you build autonomy. Well, your question is great. Is using technology okay, let me tell you about a real program. In one commune, there was an idea that young people with their own private devices, smartphones, will be used as such. They will identify people that are aware of the history, of local history. They will go there and have a conversation with them about what happened, like having like a little journalistic activity. Smartphone was a device to record it. That was a meeting between generations. These elderly people just baked a cake, had white shirts, and junior people had a kind of feeling that senior people had something interesting to say, and the smartphone was not a prerequisite, though it was just a tool. So when you use technology to make projects happen, it turns out that it can be used, but using technology for the sake of using technology is the worst. Saying that every technological education is wise, it's not true. But you have a value, an idea, and you just make it happen using technology. There are maybe very many examples. So there are ways of cooperating, communicating. And what we did during the pandemic, it was the streaming of lectures. And the class could create a presentation together or check it and talk about it. So let's talk of quality. You're saying this, well, someone will show someone else some pornography. If it won't happen at school, it will happen on the way from the school, or they go out together. If there are teenagers that will show things to one another when they're walking the dog, whatever. So I'm convinced there were situations where parents tried to limit something to us. Well, I am convinced that it should be done in a mediation, and whenever we're trying to take shortcuts, it doesn't work. I don't want to overdo things. I'm not in favor of just giving it a free way. Well, maybe one person checked the wrong box in the questionnaire. What is a ban? There are questions even to check what a total ban it means. 30% from New Kids Online said, okay, there's a ban, but nobody respects it. So it's easy to create a fiction. Let's not hamper the process of learning by using private device. They accept it. When reasonable things are happening in the recess, Nobody needs to be persecuted. I go often to schools, and really, believe me, this overdone vision of students that just sit there in their smartphones. I have 3 kids, and many times I have heard from many specialists, young kids prefer contacts online rather than direct contacts. I swear to you, as my 3 kids, I don't remember my kid saying, I'm not going out with you because I prefer to stay with my smartphone. So the vision is just caricatural. If people really overuse it, this is clinical case, and you need to treat them rather than having a vision that everyone in a population should be just tormented with these strange solutions that don't allow flexibility or individualization or some differences. I'm sure that we have many more questions. Unfortunately, we need to make this debate stop and come to an end. Thank you for your questions. I'm grateful for your participation. I can feel it is only a beginning. We need more meetings. Tomorrow you'll have more opportunities to listen to topics related to publishing of children's image. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your private experience, your research, everything you contributed to this conversation. I hope that we will have still more time to share more experiences. Thank you.